This podcast is brought to you by Metamora Martial Arts, teaching karate and self-defense techniques to children, teens, and adults since 2002. Check them out at metamoramartialarts.com and like Metamora Martial Arts on Facebook. Hey there, welcome to the Martial Arts Podcast. Thanks for listening. My name is Adam Bockler, and for those of you who don't know me, I am a school owner, I'm a published author, and most recently, that's right, I am a karate black belt, the karate black belt of the year. I'll get to that in a little bit. But most importantly, I am a martial artist. I've spent nearly 11 years in karate after I started in 2003, and I've spent nearly 4 years in the Chinese martial arts of Tai Chi Chuan and Hsing-i Chuan. Before we get any further into this podcast, this is supported by martial artists just like you. Please rate, download, subscribe on iTunes or at adambockler.com, and also like the Martial Arts Podcast on Facebook. Let me know how I'm doing over there. Ask me questions, and I'll do my best on a future episode to answer them right here. There are two big things that I'd like to cover off on this month. Number one is a tournament that I went to in Galesburg, Illinois. It was hosted and promoted by Master Aaron Wayne Duke of Galesburg Academy of Martial Arts. It was a small tournament. It was about 50 competitors, but it was so much fun. One of the cool things about it was that grapplers got title belts, which is unique at an event this size, in my opinion. The highlight of the day in Galesburg for me was a boy, before his division ran. I heard him off to the side say that it was his birthday the next day, and this was also his first tournament. He got third in the division, and when he came around, I didn't really know what to expect. He looked like he may have been emotional, and luckily for all of us, it was a positive emotion. He was so excited to get third place that he said it was the best birthday present he could have gotten, and then he leaned in and he hugged me. What a great moment for him. What a really fun moment for me too. His family was off to the side, and they later told me how elated he was, and that they all were, about this win for him. The experience with this kid shows me two things. Number one, I wish all kids could get this excited just to compete. My experience has been that kids mainly compete just to collect trophies, and they don't put in the practice to make themselves better. They just make themselves good enough to beat everybody else in the division, which I don't really think is very helpful. Competition for me is about the practice and the discipline to practice over and over and over again until I get what I want from me. When I compete, how anybody else competes is really irrelevant. I'm always judging myself and pushing myself to the next level. I don't compete for trophies. I compete all over the state, but I don't compete for trophies. I compete because I enjoy representing myself, my school, and my art. The other thing this shows me is that as instructors or judges or black belts, or as anybody who came before, so to speak, we have this ability to shape events, and we don't even realize it. I don't remember anybody else who got third that day. I don't remember a whole lot of people that got first that day, to be real honest with you. But this kid and his family must have felt some kind of connection to me or to this event that I didn't even understand at the time, and kind of still don't comprehend, but that's all right. They went out of their way later in the day to flag me down and talk about this boy's exciting weekend. I'm happy for him. Good for him. I hope he had a great birthday. I hope he comes back next year and just blows everybody out of the water. What a great attitude to have. The second thing that I'd like to get to is the USA Martial Arts Hall of Fame. And I have Steve Aldus, who's this month's guest, to thank for that. What a great weekend that was. Thank you to Dr. Jim Thomas. Thank you to Todd Summers, Eddie Parker, Jeff Mead, and Richard Clear, whose seminars I took throughout the day on Saturday at that event in Indianapolis. They let me record a lot of footage from their seminars, and I have some of it uploaded at the Metamora Martial Arts YouTube page, so go and check that out. The highlight of the event for me, believe it or not, was not receiving the award. It was seeing Master Ken in person. If you haven't seen Master Ken or Enter the Dojo, do yourself a favor. After you listen to this podcast, of course, go to YouTube and just binge on it. Just watch all of the seasons. They're in season 3 right now. It is hilarious. I guess if I'm going to plug something this month, Enter the Dojo is my plug. Master Ken is this fictitious martial arts character who's just absolutely ridiculous. I'll give you a small sample here. He, during his half-hour presentation at the event, it was a roast, really, more so than a presentation. But he said he was running a new program in his style called Ameridote, in which black belts could turn their tattered white belts in for white belts in the Ameridote system. And we all kind of laughed. And so I went outside to get his autograph, and I said, Master Ken, I would like to trade in my black belt for a white belt in your system, but there's one problem. We are here at this banquet. I have my suit on. I can't really give you my belt. I'm sorry, I can't turn it in. He goes, don't worry. You just have to promise me to burn it later. And I loved it. It was great. But the whole reason I was at this Hall of Fame Pardookie to begin with was because Steve Aldus nominated me for Karate Black Belt of the Year. All kidding aside with the Master Ken stuff, I'm super honored. Master Robert Trias founded this organization in 1976, and Master Trias is in my lineage. He brought karate back to America in the 1940s after World War II, and he also had a role in training my instructor, Dave Hockey, who was on last month's podcast. So to be in this Hall of Fame that was started by Master Trias, who's very close in my lineage, it's so much fun, and it's an honor. Steve Aldus has helped me grow so much as a martial artist, but also as an entrepreneur here in my area. He's opened the door for me to meet so many different martial artists here in the Peoria community. Last year he asked me to help him do a photo shoot for Taekwondo Times, and within a few months I was also writing my own article about Facebook ads and marketing for Taekwondo Times. He also loves this podcast. He is a huge proponent of it. He talks it up during class, and he's talked about it with other people. He's been so excited to do this show for a long time, and I've been very excited too. So we were both just overjoyed to be able to finally sit down and talk to each other for what you're about to hear here in a few minutes. I'm going to make a reference here that I'm going to assume is going to go over many people's heads, but I'm going to do it anyway because it's my show, and I can do cool things like that. But Steve Aldus has done and continues to do for me what a guy by the name of Terry Funk did for a guy by the name of Cactus Jack in ECW in the mid-1990s. And what I mean by that is Steve Aldus gives so much of himself for his students, not just me, but all of them, because he loves the martial arts so much, and I think we are indebted to him for that. All that being said, I think you're really going to like this interview. He talks about training in the Chinese martial arts in Hong Kong way back in the 1970s, and how when he came back to America, he had to prove himself, and Tai Chi Chuan and Hsing-i Chuan and Bakwa Chang. And to do that, he had to spar, essentially. He really kind of just had to fight people to show that his martial art was real. But I had so much fun listening to him talk. I think you are too. The hour went by so quick that we talked together. And I hope that we can go into more detail on a future show. Until then, here's our chat. So we're here with Steve Aldus. It's the Martial Arts Podcast. Thanks for being on the show. He's cracking a smile right now. He laughs. He thinks this is fun.
I do. It's going to be great.
Yeah. So one of the first things that I wanted to talk about was your training in Hong Kong. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, when I was in Hong Kong, I wanted to get a Far Eastern or a Chinese philosophy class. And so I was looking for someone who would teach me that. And somebody told me, you need to go see Teacher Lee, and he'd be more than happy to help you with that. So I located Teacher Lee, and I found out he's a martial artist. But I also found out I could learn the Chinese philosophy through the martial art. And so I thought I'd do that for a little bit and get enough Chinese philosophy that would whet my knowledge, and I ended up staying and training.
Now, what year was this?
This was 1970.
And as a guy who's looking for Teacher Lee, what was that experience like? Was it difficult?
Yeah, it was, because I had to ask, I don't know how many people. Well, we don't have anybody like that. are you sure you want to do that? You're not Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
So I would have to go through a procedure of going to person A, person B, person C, and then right around probably S and T, I ended up getting pointed toward Master Lee. Because keep in mind, regardless of whether Bruce Lee was popular and all that, it was still not a good thing to teach a round eye, so to speak, Chinese martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
So I was fortunate to find the gentleman. He's a Taoist, but he respected all religions. And at the time, I would be considered more of a Christian, kind of a loose-based Christian, so to speak. And he was very kind to me on that, and I developed a really, really deep respect for his faith. And they don't call it faith, obviously, Taoism, but I looked at it that way. It was a tenet that he lived by.
Now, when you guys met, was he resistant to having a round eye, so to speak?
Well, I didn't meet him right off the bat.
Okay.
You don't meet the head teacher right off the bat. I met probably a third tier person and told them why I was there, and they said, well, you need to come back. And by talking with people, I found out I kind of made an error because you're supposed to bring a gift. Now, the thing is, just to bring a gift is not good enough. You have to bring something that is important or special to the instructor, not to the third tier student.
Right.
So I had to ask around, and that was very difficult. And I happened to luck in. I was visiting a shop that was a Chinese herbal shop, and I was talking about my problems, and there was a gentleman's son. He could speak English, and he told me, he says, well, you need to do this. This is how you have to approach this. And so he instructed me on that, and they happen to know Teacher Lee, and so what I did is I picked him up a little golden, it was like a necklace that had some really ornate designs of an yin and yang, and so I picked that up. Matter of fact, back then I think it was actually gold, which was not as expensive as it is now. Produced that, and then they told me to come back, and so this was an ongoing thing, and I finally got to meet him, and he said, through an interpreter, you come and train.
How long did the process take for you guys to actually meet?
That probably took, I'd say, 2 to 3 months.
Huh.
I know. What can you say?
Wow.
That's part of the, I found out later, that's part of the weeding out process. Mm-hmm. If you're not really serious, well, you're not going to go through all this. I had to find the proper approach by talking to a lot of other people, investigating what I needed to do. So I guess they thought I was serious enough to bring me on as a student. Didn't mean they were nice to me, but they brought me in as a student.
So when you say that they weren't nice to you, what were some of the things that they did in class?
Well, one of the things that really irritated me is when I first got there, the only person that I knew that could speak any type of English at all was the third tier student that I talked to. And then I would assume that some of the younger people could, because it's a cosmopolitan city. There are like a lot of different cultures there. Well, I'm going through early training, which was a lot of yoga style training at first, stretching, all these different postures. They would consider power yoga here, like you go into a lotus, your hands go between your legs, and you're standing on, you're holding yourself up with your hands. So we do all of that, and I don't know how long, this is probably about 5 months, 6 months. I'm just watching people and trying to follow them. And it was very difficult, because you hear something in Chinese, I don't have the slightest idea what they're saying.
They didn't teach you Chinese in Galesburg?
No, they did not. That was something that would have been very a great preparation. But what happened is, after about, I'd say 5 months, I think is about that long, one of the senior students said something to me and in Chinese, and one of the younger students said, "Well, he wants you to do this," like, with an accent, and I go, "What?" I looked at him and I said, "What?" And yes, he wants you to do this. I said, "You can speak English? Who else can speak English in here?" Younger brother, older brother. Top tier students could speak, not fantastic English, but enough. And I found out even Teacher Lee, this is L-I, by the way. Whenever you say Lee, people automatically, back in the old days, said, "Well, Bruce Lee?" I go, no, L-I. Okay. So I found even Teacher Lee could actually speak broken English when he wanted to, not a lot. And so I go up and I've got my older brother and Teacher Lee, and I said, "I understand you can speak some English." I said, "I can't believe this." I said, "With all respect," I said, "I can't believe that you would not help me and teach me in part of the things in English." I said, "Sir," and he goes, he turns, he looks at me, he goes, in a real thick accent, "You still here?" And turned around and walked away. How can you argue that?
Yeah.
In other words, yeah, I'm still training. And then after that, I got a little better training via some of the English. But to this day, people say, "Well, you should be able to speak Chinese." I go, "I don't think so." When I did come back, I had a little knowledge of Chinese and terms, and then I went to Korean martial arts and learned all the terms there, and then I went into Okinawan martial arts and learned all the Korean terms. So I just figured that, and my instructor did counsel me on that. When I got ready to leave, he says, when you go back, he didn't say it this way, I had some interpretation. He says, when you go back, he says, you cannot train people the way we train here. Because we couldn't drink, smoke, get tattooed. It was a strict Taoist theory that you couldn't do any of that. If you got in a fight, you could get it removed from class. So it was, he told me, if you do that, you probably won't have very many students. And he's right. United States is United States. And he says, you may have to, he says, you're American. He says, you need to teach in English.
Now let's back up a second. What brought you to Hong Kong in the first place?
Well, I was in the military Navy. I was an electronics specialist, and they have what they call a MOTU unit, Mobile Technical Unit. And so what they would do is if a ship had a problem with, let's say, their air search radar or their surface search radar or their TAC-AN or whatever piece of equipment I need to, I also did radio, so I would work on the crypto gear, which is top secret. So if there was some problem with that, I would have to, when the ship pulled into Hong Kong, I used to be on a MOTU ship. Well, that pulled out. That was no longer there. So all the ships coming over to the Far East, that's when it reports a call. And so when they were there on Liberty, I would go out on their ship, like from 8 to 5, 8 to 4, somewhere like that, and I would work on their equipment and fix it if they couldn't. So that was my specialty. Back then you had ETR, ETN, and that meant ETR was radar, ETN was radio. Well, I actually did both. I also was trained in short base communications, helicopter communications, and I went to a number of Army schools. So I would go to Vietnam periodically and help them out, and then I would be either flown back or come back by ship to Hong Kong. And there's no base in Hong Kong. People always say, "Well, there's no base in Hong Kong." I go, "I know, but that's where I was at. I had it made, basically." So it was a good deal for me. So I got to train, but I also did my job. So that's how I ended there.
Were there any other service members training in Chinese martial arts with you?
No. There were, at one time when I first started, there were a couple Australians, a couple British, and they quit.
Was this before or after they tried to find Teacher Lee?
Some of them never made it to find Teacher Lee because they didn't know the protocol. I found this out, that some people wanted to train, but they didn't know protocol, and so they never made it past first base, so to speak, if you want to use that term. And then the people who did make it back by first base, for whatever reason, maybe they had an N, some kind of, I'm trying to think of the term. In other words, somebody went before the senior student and said, I could speak for this person, could you please take him? In other words, they would go in and do that. So, but a lot of them didn't last. They just couldn't take it. It's not necessarily the harshness training, but there's a lot of psychological things that go on with the training. And I was just happy I ended up where I did. And when I came back, it sustained me for quite a long time.
What was class like over there? How were his classes?
The classes were 4 hours a night, 5 days a week, and then you could go Saturday and work out, and then you could sleep at the studio on the floor, and then you could go get up next day and train too. So the classes, we'd spend an awful lot of time on form particulars. Here we don't really have the time to do that. You just learn the form best you can. Hopefully the instructor's a good instructor, and then the longer you stay with them, the more they can get into the intricacies. Well, we had to learn that pretty quickly because you couldn't go to the next form or next section of the form unless you knew it really well. And by learning it, that's breathing, the bunkai you would call it in Okinawan, or the self-defense technique. And then the other thing is we did stepping drills. Like in Hsing-i chuan, you do stepping drills, stepping. That's what you do. Chicken step, long step, short step, diagonal step, all these steps, and they would then be brought into like the earth form or the metal form. So you'd spend a lot of time doing that, and then we'd have a lot of time spent on the meridians, because they wanted you to strike certain areas with certain techniques. Because obviously if I come in with a fist, hit you in the forehead, I may knock you cuckoo a little bit, but I break my hand. So they had specific weaponry of your hand, different ways to strike for different parts of the anatomy. And then you had breathing exercises, weapons, and it was quite entailed. We had Tai Chi Chuan, the long form, Old Yan style. We did Bakwa Chang, but my two main studies were Hsing-i chuan and Old Yan style Tai Chi Chuan. I did do Bakwa Chuan, and up to just recently, I never really showed it in class or taught it because I didn't feel that I had a really good handle on it. But then I'm looking around and seeing other people, and I think I have a better handle on it than what I thought I did. Same with Tai Chi Chuan. I started seeing some of the ways that people teach Tai Chi Chuan or Tai Chi. Some people do Tai Chi, and there's a difference to me on the two.
Explain it.
Tai Chi or Tai Chi is, in most cases when you use that term, is considered a holistic or health-oriented art or series of exercises. Doesn't mean that they're not doing the form correctly, it's just that they're doing it for health. Okay? Sometimes Tai Chi is also used by people who are in the know, but they shorten it for speaking or for when they're writing something out. Another thing that is different is there's no self-defense usually in those aspects. Tai Chi Chuan or Supreme Ultimate Fist or boxing style is not only the health benefit, but you also get the martial art as well. And the other thing about Tai Chi Chuan is there's a separation in Chinese art between the form and a weapon. And a weapon is they have different names for the weapon forms. The Tai Chi Chuan is considered the empty hand form. Now somebody will say, well, don't they have a Tai Chi sword? Yes, they do, but it's not the same as Tai Chi Chuan. It's the weapon and the form are different.
What's different about them? Like,
well, the difference is the to me, Tai Chi Chuan form, the old Yan style form, is there's a certain number of steps, 181 movements, and that's what you do. They have like let's say a Tai Chi sword form that has a form all in and of itself. It's not necessarily mimicking every motion in a Tai Chi Chuan form. And so it's not like some arts where they take, let's say, I don't know, a pinan, for instance, and they take that form and then they make a weapons form from that. Most Okinawans have their own weapons forms too. So you're not going to say, I'm going to do, an easy explanation, you say, I'm going to do kata, and then if you're going to do a weapons form, it's kobudo. There's a difference.
Right.
We have the same separation in Chinese martial arts. So when I speak of Tai Chi Chuan, that's the form. And where the problem arises here in the United States, this is my opinion, and some people disagree with this, but I found it to be true in my experience. If you have somebody who's health-oriented, and then they try to slip over into the martial aspect, but they haven't been trained that way, and so what they'll do is they'll show what I call the baby self-defenses or beginning self-defenses. As long as they stay in their own pond, they're fine. Now, if they go and start interacting with Okinawan martial artists, or Japanese martial artists, or kickboxers, or taekwondoists, that can get ugly. It can be really bad, because especially back when I came back from overseas, Okinawans, there was Okinawan martial arts, which Japanese martial art, and judo, and some taekwondo. Okay. I'm not saying there weren't taekwondos around. I'm just saying if you went to a lot of places, that's what you're going to find. Mm-hmm. And if you walked into a school, or somebody walked into your school and you're teaching Tai Chi Chuan, you're boasting the fact that it can be done as self-defense, somebody would say, okay, show me. And back then they weren't nice. So that's my explanation. I look at one as being health-oriented only, and the other as being health-oriented and a martial art. So you get the entire yin and yang out of it. The other way, you're just doing a large, let's say, yin, and then if you do martial only, then you get a large yang. So if you're looking at a nice smooth circle, you don't have that anymore. You have this big looping thing, and it's small on the other end. You're out of balance. Mm-hmm. Okay? Does that help you?
All right. That helps a lot. I'm sure I could ask like a bunch of questions about you training in Hong Kong, but I do kind of want to move this forward a little bit.
That's fine.
When you came back home to the States, we've talked before a little bit about what others thought of your experience over there, and I'd like you to share some of that.
Well, to be perfectly frank about it, when I first came back from overseas, and I went to school, and I went to junior college, and I didn't really talk about it very much. Now, I did finally get a couple of people who found out, I heard you in the military, did you do any training? And they kept on me, and I said, I did a little bit.
Now, how long did you do training in Hong Kong?
I was there for 4 years. 4 years, yeah. Which is, 4 hours a night.
It's quite a bit.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
It is. And I continued training, and unfortunately, when I got back to the United States, getting back to that, there was not really anybody that I could train with. So I was training myself still and working hard at it. And I thought, well, the best thing to do is interact with other martial artists, and I can see where my art is. Well, Chinese martial art during that era, this is just my opinion, and I was in the Midwest. I'm sure on the West Coast it might have been different, but it was not really a big thing, not respected. And some of the people I ran into just didn't do it very well. And so I had to jump that hurdle, as well as just my style. I had people say, well, you made up that style. Now keep in mind, everybody needs to bear in mind, back then, there weren't a lot of books on martial arts at all. Chinese martial art, you might as well forget about it. There was no YouTube. There was nothing. You couldn't really see anything of what I did. Tai Chi Chuan, if you did run into that, there were some people that had been overseas and they were more health oriented. I didn't really run into anybody, not that they didn't exist, but I didn't run into anybody that did the martial aspect of it. So going back to that time frame, which is hard for people to comprehend, you just didn't have the outlets that you do now. Mm-hmm. And so I basically a lot of times had to look to someone and say, hey, I can just show you what I know, and then you can make your own determination. That usually was good enough for most people.
Who was one of the first, or how did you start? I don't know if exposing the right word, but how did you start actually getting Tai Chi Chuan out there? Like, who was receptive to the idea?
Not for a long time. People were not really receptive to it. They looked at it as an old person's art. To take something that Master Ken said about my art when we were in the Hall of Fame, he was saying it's for sissies and for old people, and he was joking, obviously, but back then that's what it was. That's what they considered it. It was like something that old people did. They did it in the parks overseas, and even that wasn't known then. But people didn't really understand it. And here's the concept of the United States. And it was the same overseas, believe it or not. I need to see what you got. You need to show me what you can do. And unfortunately, you had to be a good fighter in order to get your philosophy across.
Yeah, because this was in the 70s, so like full contact fighting was a big deal at that
that's
time.
right. Yeah, you had that, and people were, well, what do you got? You know, it's not and the training was different then. You know, people would just get banged up and beat up, and they would keep coming back. If you did that now, you wouldn't have any students. You'd probably have 3 or 4 lawyers at your door. I mean, it was totally different. And so I had to come to the School of Hard Knocks and constantly prove myself. I think what made me a better martial artist in the long run, and I know it made me a better sparrer and fighter, but what it also did is it allowed me then to impart my philosophy, and people were more accepting of it because you were a good fighter. Mm-hmm. That's terrible to have to do it that way, but that's the way it was. Now it's not so much of a problem because I have friends, and I've established myself with Okinawans and Japanese martial arts and Taekwondoists who know of my background now, and there's many times, like I just finished a seminar down in Florida. It's called a bunkai, or self-defense. I was with Master Horn, Master Webster. There was Master Jimmy Jackson, and I'm right now. I'm sorry, I can't remember the other 2 gentlemen, but and I apologize to them. It's just not coming to me. But they're all Okinawan practitioners. I was the only one that was not. When I'd done Mrs. Vera's, we had one, let's say last year. I was the only Chinese represented martial arts. Everybody else was Okinawan. Mm-hmm. And that happened to me a lot. But to give you an idea, and I'll make this quick, I wrote about it in an article I did. But when I was in Jacksonville, Florida, I was going to be getting out of the military. That's where I was going to be discharged. So I was waiting. And while I was there, I made some friends with some Okinawans. And one gentleman, I usually don't mention people's names simply because I don't have their permission to do it, you know. And for all I know, some of them, I'm getting older now, and people are passing right and left. But nonetheless, there was a gentleman down there. There's Wado-Ryu, Isshin-Ryu, and one of the gentlemen was having a tournament, and he said, "Hey, can you come in? I really like what you do. Could you come in and do a seminar? I can't remember, it was Friday. I think it was Friday night before the tournament." And I said, "Well, yeah, I can do that, but they're all Okinawan tournament. I said, I don't think I'll have anybody come to that. Of course, you remember this, I'm sure, because I wrote an article about it. And
it's in Taekwondo Times, by the way. September 2013, I think, is the article.
Yeah, that's true.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
Go pick up some Taekwondo Times and check out the article.
You're so kind. And Mr. Bachler is my fantastic editor on that. I thank him very much for that. He's been invaluable with a lot of demonstrations, and I really appreciate him. And I know he loves doing the things he's doing, like his podcast, and I think it enriches all martial artists, and I appreciate his time. But anyway, so we're there, and I come in, and there's all these, I can't remember how many, 30 people, and they're all hardcore martial artists. I mean, you can tell they're just standing there like they want to rip somebody's head off. And the instructor gets up there and he says, I'd like to introduce Mr. Steve Aldus. He's a Chinese martial artist. He'll be showing you some self-defense and form and Tai Chi Chuan. And they're all like deer in headlights. It's like, oh my gosh, is this what we're here for? And then he says, and you have the floor, you have the mat. And all of a sudden my head is just like reeling. I'm thinking, what am I going to do? And not make a long story short, we started the form. The people are not doing the form because they're like snapping their arms, and it's not done that way. And I'm losing the crowd, and so I finally say, everybody stop. I'll show you the short part of the form, and then we'll do something afterwards. So I show them the first part of the form, part one, which is our short form. And I said, now we'll show the bunkai. Woo! Everybody perked up. Bunkai, he knows our term. That's something. So I'm showing a couple self-defenses from a few of the movements that I showed, and I had some brown belts there, which Q ranks, which was kind of nice, and a couple big guys. One was a champion breaker, and I said, oh, this is fantastic. Go ahead and throw a punch. And the first time I tried to hit me so hard, when I deflected him, he went flat to the ground. It was unbelievable. Everybody gasped. Oh my gosh! And so the instructor says, "Well, hit him." He says, "Sir, I did. I tried to." And the next time I stopped him, I did this like little lay on the arm and caught his fist with my hand and snapped forward, and his teeth rattled. And he said his teeth just rattled in his head. And then everybody was cool. Then we started doing it, and the seminar went very well. But I didn't have to fight that time. But keep in mind, somebody says, well, what'd you have? Like 6th, 7th degree black belts there? I go, no, this is like mid-70s, okay? No, not even mid. It'd be early 70s because I was still getting discharged. So if you had a 4th degree black belt there, that was a high-ranking person. Mm-hmm. So, if they were second dan, like a knee dan or whatever, they'd been in it for a while. They were hardcore. So people just couldn't believe it. They said, well, that's unbelievable. They're not have any higher rank than that. I said, keep in mind, the advent of high rank is fairly a modern thing. I'd say mid-'80s, and then it really exploded in the 90s. So that's the way it was. I can't inflate the rank because it wasn't there. But that kind of tells you a little bit about how it was when I came back.
So how long did it take from when you came back to, you just had your art that you learned in Hong Kong. How long before you started training in other arts?
I started training in other arts, I'd say the beginning of the 80s. I went to Taekwondo, and then I went to Okinawan, basically Seido, Matsumura, Shorin-ryu, Keppo-ha. I did jiu-jitsu as well. All these were in between, and I received Dan rank in all of those, legally. In other words, they just go, oh, I like you, you're great. I learned all the things you needed to know for that. The Choi brothers, my Taekwondo roots there, they were young guys, crazy. They were crazy young. And they were good at what they did. And then from there, I went with some of my friends, trained with them, helped them run schools. Al Nemo, Kelly O'Keefe, Bob Lawrence, and they had gentlemen over them, and so I received rank that way, and through testings and just knowing the things I need to know. And then Master Black from down in Carbondale, he promoted me to 8th degree black belt through the Alliance. And I had to learn the 8th degree black belt for him, and I did it in a tournament. Is kind of my way of showing the fact I learned it. It was at his tournament. And then as far as jiu-jitsu, that was through Kelly O'Keefe, and then early on it was with Master Gross. Master Gross was teaching a class over in Morton, a Wateroo class, and they had him come over twice a week, and I would go over there when he was there. Mm-hmm. And he was no nonsense. Basically, he was tough. And then I ran into him a few times when he was going over to Kelly O'Keefe's and Miss Vera Harrison. They were in the same building, and I would go over whenever he was there, whenever I could make it. And I learned a lot just being around that gentleman. And he's old school. Mr. Horn's old school. Mr. Keppel's old school. They're from the old days. Mm-hmm. And so if you get a chance to be around old schoolers and you can survive what they do to you, then you're going to learn a lot.
Now, what was, I guess, what was easy and what were the challenges about learning new arts? Because, I mean, when you look at them on their surface, they look pretty different from each other.
They do, but one of the nice bridges was Hsing-i chuan, because Hsing-i chuan is in the lineage of most Okinawa martial arts. Mm-hmm. I think your own art mentions Li Shuni
right.
2 times in various forms. What, Go Pai Sho? What's the other one? There's one that's 5 animal or 3 animals, and then there's
probably the in show.
I can't remember the other one, but I remember people would say, I'd ask them, I'd say, well, do you read that? What is this? Li Shuni, who's he? Well, he's the person who gave us this form. I said, he's a Chinese martial artist. He's a Hsing-i chuan practitioner who also did Bakwa chuan as well. He was brought in by a gentleman to train with one of the best Bakwa, Chang. I always say chuan, but it's Chang. People. Some people call it Bakwa, Pakwa. It depends on how it is. Mm-hmm. But that made it easier for me to do the show Renru because the stances had been shortened by Mr. Keppel, so it was more like Hsing-i chuan to me. Taekwondo was a little different because they had so much emphasis on high kicks, and not that we didn't do that, but when we're fighting, our kicks are to the legs and groin and bladder, short ribs at the most, and I was uneasy kicking high to the head because we would just sweep somebody off their feet and do that. But in Taekwondo, when you're in tournaments or in class, you cannot kick to the legs, sweep, punch to the face. So to me, it was easy because overseas we had to worry about everything. Mm-hmm. You know, it would be quite proper to be given a point or a acknowledgement of a strike. If I were to strike you, in over here we call it block, strike the arm and hit you, and then take you down, that's worth 3 valid. That's 3 valid strikes. If I get you turned around, strike you in the not hard, but strike you in the spine, take you down backwards, and then strike you in the face, and then maybe drop a knee on you, that's 4 valid. Mm-hmm. So that was the hardest thing, is actually trying to get within the rules of what we were doing.
Yeah, because from what it sounded like in class is brutal. the art's brutal, and then you have other arts that have been more kind of
sport oriented.
Yeah.
And that sport I found was very good at stretching my horizons, because it called for a discipline that I didn't really need in the. I was always disciplined, I thought, but it called for a discipline I didn't necessarily need in my other art. And so when you're doing point, you can't blast a person in the face and knock their, teeth out or anything. I mean, that's. But early on when I was sparring, when you could actually kick to the face and you could kick hard to the body and punch to the head and sweep somebody and take them down, depending on what tournament you were in and what the rules were. But they were kind of brutal back then. Mm-hmm. And then there was kickboxing. Choi brothers and other people were experimenting with kickboxing organizations. They made their own. So to get back to your question, what did I find that was difficult? I think if I would have went from any of those arts to Chinese art, it would have been more difficult. But going from Chinese to Okinawan or Jiu-Jitsu, since we had China, it was almost the same thing, so that wasn't difficult. The difference is in some of the Jiu-Jitsu classes I attended, there was one Hakaru Jiu-Jitsu, Stu Inman, and they want to just break your wrist, break your arm, and because that's what they're that's the way they're trained. Mm-hmm. Now they can do some control too. I think Mr. Inman was also a police officer, so he adapted a lot of his things as come-alongs. But in China, we don't worry about that. We want a reaction, and once we get the reaction, we'll do whatever we need to do. It's always I'm going to shock you first, and then I will do a joint lock. It's just like in stick fighting over in China when we did that. I'm not looking for a takeaway. I'm looking to defang the snake by hitting your fingers, hitting your somewhere in your face, do something. Then, if it's there, I'll take it. Totally different philosophy than, like, say, over in the Philippines, for instance. Of course, they would have dagger and stick, long stick, short stick, and they would have duels to the death over there. So you just wouldn't want to bow the wrong way if you're over there, because it could mean a lot different thing that you think. But in answer to your question, I didn't find it that difficult to go from Chinese martial art to Taekwondo, or Chinese martial art to Okinawa martial arts, or Jiu-Jitsu. I just didn't find it difficult. And we had Chinese wrestling incorporated in the China, where we did a lot of grappling, a lot of throws, but we didn't call it judo or grappling. It was just part of that whole thing.
It's part of the art.
Part of the art. That's it. It was all encompassing. So, I think that's about all I can say about that. I'm not saying the Chinese martial art is harder and the others are easy. I'm not saying that. I think it just made it easier for me.
Right.
I will, one proviso, when we were doing Shorin-Ryu, and I was in Mr. Price's class, they have a stance, and I'm trying to think of what it's called now. It's heel to toe. And I can't think of what it is. He's going to probably slap me for not remembering it. But we don't have anything even close to that in China. I mean, there's somewhat close, but not even the way it is. It's like heel to the top of the big toe, and that one I struggled with for a little bit. But once I got it, it was, and I could see the fundamental benefit of the stance, being in close, and it's a pretty stable stance, especially if you bring your knees and then snap up. But that was about the only thing I remember that was difficult.
Right. Now I realize I'm skipping over a lot of.
That's all right.
Many years of martial arts experience. But when did you first open your own program? When did you start taking on students?
Well, that would have been. I mean, officially, that would have been in, I'm trying to think, it was in the 80s, mid-80s. I started teaching Taekwondo and some Chinese martial art. And I did that for, I think, 8 years. And then I stopped. My son was getting older, and so what I did is I stopped doing that. And at the same time while I was teaching, I would visit my other friends' schools. and help with those, and then spar. There are people there. It's just like I'd go over. Oh, we get to spar Mr. Aldus. I said, yeah, okay, well, we'll spar, and it was fun. I had a great time. But once I stopped doing that, I helped Kelly O'Keefe for a while, going over to his school. Al Nimmo, I helped him when he moved to East Side because he needed some help there teaching, and we did that. And I helped, who was it? Bob Lawrence and I would go over and help at his school. He no longer is involved in martial arts. But Mr. O'Keefe has started teaching again, and Mr. Nimmo always has had a school. Mm-hmm. But he was probably one of the top-notch coaches for Olympic-style sparring in the state, for sure. And Mr. O'Keefe was another one who was very, very good. Both of them national champions, and they had some people going to qualifying for as national champion to try out for the Olympics. So it was pretty interesting to be among everybody during those eras, because then those instructors are still tremendous individuals to this day. Miss Vera Harrison, everybody knows Miss Vera. She was a terror back in the old days. Men didn't even want to fight her, and but she's the most gentle person you're going to, the most loving person you're going to meet. So there's just a lot of people in this area that are tremendous in martial artists, and I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, we got a good lot, that's for sure.
We do.
Chinese martial arts. When did you start teaching Tai Chi Chuan and Hsing-i?
I started helping Preston Jackson here just, what is it now, 2007. I used to go to his class when it was in his backyard, and I wasn't actually teaching, but I'd interact with people. Teaching, I'm trying to think of when that was. It probably would have been around 97, somewhere in there. And then we did that until just 6 months ago. And then I went over to Morton and started teaching over there, but I also taught my own class kind of on top of going to Saturday class, and I'm trying to think how long that's been. You probably know better than I do. But
I started in 2010.
2010, but I think I was doing it about a year before that. So maybe 2 years. But I started over at Cat Ching Do Academy. They gave me a Tuesday night, and of course Mr. Bachler's been with us since then, and you have your own class that you are teaching now, and we do appreciate him being over. I know this is your podcast, but it's he's done very well for himself, and he's a great person. I'm happy to have him as a student.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
I'm trying to think before we wrap up.
Yes.
You've talked in class many times about Master Lee's stories.
Yes. Yes. I was considered the insolent one. Over here, I've been a perfect student. Over there, not having the traditional Chinese family training, I find myself falling into traps and pitfalls because I just couldn't help myself. So it's more like I was jumping in rather than falling in. So the stories. What about them?
Which ones would you like to tell? I've heard a couple of them.
I don't know. What would you like to hear?
I think I'd like to hear the one Monday again that you told about when you guys were at dinner.
Oh my gosh, that was just something. You have to understand, Master Lee was also a traditional Chinese doctor in acupuncture and acupressure, and
is that how he made his living? So to speak?
Well, he did pretty well doing that. Yes, he did well in as a martial art instructor too. But yeah, he did make a living on that. But there'd be times I'd be sick, or I'd come back from being overseas. When I say overseas, I was overseas, but I mean like Vietnam or. Coming back on a ship, and the different environment when sometimes you get a cold or you're not feeling the best, and he'd make these potions. I call them potions, but they worked. they made me feel better. I remember I sprained an ankle one time, and he got the needles out, and I don't know what kind of stuff he put on me, but he put that on, and my ankle really didn't swell a lot. And I was up and on it in about 2 days, and being able to, it was a miracle as far as I'm concerned. But getting back to the potions, one time I had some bad stomach. I was getting a cold, and I told him about it, and he makes his potion, and almost all his potions tasted horrible, just terrible. So I drink this down, and I think, gee, many Christmas, this is just worst of the worst. And I said to my instructor, I said, Teacher Lee, I said, why can't you have something that tastes good? And he looks me right in the face, and he says, if it tastes good, it's not good for you. And I go, oh boy, okay, I guess that's the end of that one. So it wasn't too long. I don't know if it was the same night or a couple of days, but nonetheless, we all go out to eat. And of course, when you're sitting they have this big table, and they have these big, they're almost like rotisserie type, where they put different things in different levels, and you can spin them around, and they keep them filled up. And they sit with the instructor, and then Master Lee, and then all the seniors start, first, second, third, fourth, and then they come around. Well, I'm about 3 o'clock on a 12 o'clock. Mr. Lee, 12 o'clock.
Now, about how many people were at this?
Well, let's see. We'd have, to get to me, there's 4. No, there's 5. So there's be 5 on the other side. I'm 6, and there's another 5. So that would be 11 and 11, 22.
So was this the entire class?
No.
How big was the whole class?
The whole class, depending on who shows up at different times, because some people can only come at a certain day. You probably had 60, 70 students.
Wow.
Yeah. But anyway, so I'm right about 3 o'clock, and we're all eating, and one of his favorite things were, they call them Chinese donuts. They were made special for him. They were crispy on the outside and kind of just really good on the inside, and then they sprinkle them with sugar, which, sugar, I mean, thinking, here's a man of all these talents, and he eats really well, and this was his thing. So I see him, the little waitress brings him over, sets him by him, and I'm looking, and I kind of crane up and look, and this catches the eye of 3 or 4 of the senior brothers, and they're looking at me, and they're shaking their head like they know what's going to happen. They're shaking their head, and they're one like, waving his hand, and I'm just waiting, and everybody's eating, and then finally Teacher Lee picks up one of them, and he bites into it. He's got this really, really pleased look on his face, and here it comes. I say, sir, how does that taste? He goes, I still remember it. He goes, heavenly. Heavenly. And I go, and here it is. One of the older brothers, heads on the